Hi, everyone. Welcome to Your Stake, Your Story. We are a video series with financial advisors focused on highlighting best practices of financial advisors around ESG, SRI, and values-based investing. Today, I'm really excited to have Kate Barron-Alicante. Kate is a certified financial planner and is an impact-focused advisor working alongside progressive clients who want to live abundantly and purposefully and make a powerful difference in the world with their money. As Abacus's Director of Impact, Kate is focused on how Abacus, as the first financial services B Corp, can deepen, expand, and embody its impact as an enterprise. Kate, thanks so much for joining.
Hey, Gabe, great to be here. Good to see you and hear you.
Yes, you too. We have a nice long history of working together, and I'd love to hear, actually, to begin with, can you tell the audience about yourself, where you grew up, and what your journey was to financial advising?
Sure. And I love that you start with the roots. I think it's so important for people to get to know our story as we do this work. I grew up as the daughter of an immigrant from Ireland and the daughter of a transplant who was originally from South Louisiana, and together they raised us in New Jersey. So I grew up with very interesting dinner time table conversations, given that background. And was really oriented from a really young age to all things international. And that kind of set me on a particular path that was a long and winding way to get to financial planning and advising. So I went abroad in high school for a year. I went abroad and focused on international relations and international development for my undergraduate degree and graduate degree. And through that journey, I think within hindsight, what I can see was that I was looking for ways to understand inequality and really like systems, right? So how are humans being impacted by the systems that we live within? I didn't have that language at the beginning of the journey, but really continually trying to get out of what was familiar to me to help me see the contrast was a big part of that. And I never in a million years thought I would work in finance. Ever. I stayed far away from the business school kids and more likely to do things in the realm of macroeconomics and like global financial systems work in my education. And really one of the biggest turning points for the work that I did that led me here was I spent about more than 10 years, close to 15 years in nonprofit work, philanthropy, advocacy. And a big chunk of that was after Hurricane Katrina back in South Louisiana, where my mom's family is from. And that was kind of my dream job because I ended up working for a global humanitarian aid agency for part of that time. And I was able to really work with frontline groups and try to connect the dots with resources. So anything from sitting with fishers who had lost their boat, homeowners who lost their home, and sitting with them in their FEMA trailer and helping them navigate insurance paperwork, grant paperwork from local governments or from local nonprofits, all the way up to doing like advocacy in DC and trying to change how money flows were happening. And it's a big kind of influence on my work and I think my life, because one of the things I realized was at the end of the day, all this work in the nonprofit social change space had a lot to do with broken systems and had a lot to do with money flows. And a lot of the folks who were working inside the nonprofit sector had kind of a no-go feelings around money, right? Whether they came from money or they didn't come from money. So as time went on, I decided like that was actually very intriguing to me to go towards both this thing that seems so important and also seemed so taboo. What is it to understand money? What is it to understand how the philanthropists made their money? And so, that was sort of a big picture view, like maybe a systems level view of what I was trying to figure out through my work. But personally too, I didn't know about the field of financial advising or financial planning until I was married and had kids and was really trying to navigate a lot of just family dynamics to figure things out. And I thought, oh, well, what if I go and learn this kind of practical skill I like people, right? I'm curious about money. This seems like a really useful thing to know about. And it wasn't until I came into the financial planning sector that I heard of something called socially responsible investing.
Mhm.
And it shocked me because I thought I knew about how money was flowing in the nonprofit space, but I
Mhm.
had no idea how that compared to how the way money was flowing in the capital markets for, social entrepreneurship or different, or philanthropy from where it comes from. So that's, a lot of the looking back, a lot of the thread that led me towards stepping into financial planning. And when the time came, I actually talked to a lot of people because I'd been around the block in life enough to know that just because something sounds really cool and interesting might not be if you talk to the people doing the work. So I just talked to a lot of people who had different roles inside financial services. I'm so grateful for all of them, mostly certified financial planners, because I figured that's what I want to do. If those are the people who have this holistic skill set, they work directly with people. I want to do that. I don't want to be far away from people.
Mhm.
So I talked to a lot of folks, and then I realized that it'd have to be the right fit to go to a firm. And luckily, pretty early on in that journey, I found Abacus, and things kind of fell into place. So I've been at Abacus for about 5 years now.
Wow. And can you say a little bit more about, you're saying that, I mean, ESG seems like it was a natural fit based on everything that you had done beforehand, but did you learn about that as you were going through the discovery process, or you had already made the decision to move into financial planning and then you found out, oh, this is a socially responsible investing, very cool thing?
I mean, it's interesting, and I don't know if this has changed in the years since, but these were almost two different worlds that weren't communicating to each other inside financial services, right? So there were the folks who were getting the skill set, the technical skill set to be certified financial planners were one group of people that I spoke with. I spoke with people who were doing more like credit counseling as well, because I came from a nonprofit background. So what is it to work with people at that level of wealth?
Mhm.
And then there were these other conversations about specifically investing in a different way. And that conversation doesn't happen inside the certified financial planning curriculum or pathway. So you have to develop that knowledge separately, right? Which is what I think a lot of advisors right now in the space who came up through that pathway are like, oh my gosh, I don't know about this whole world. I want to go figure it out, right? That's like a lot of people that you guys talk to. I want to figure it out. I want to learn more.
Mhm.
But it has always felt kind of different. And to find a firm where I could do both financial planning and ESG, SRI, impact investing, I feel really grateful for where I landed to be in a place where we do both, right, with all of our clients.
That's really amazing. And thank you for sharing. I'd love to hear if you're still working with similar people, or if you're now serving different types of clients, or if it's still people that are very focused on the philanthropic space.
Yeah, it's funny because I think I assumed when I came into financial planning that I was going to work with sort of people in their just starting out in life, like in their 30s, trying to build, navigate job changes and having their first kid and buying a home, which is sort of a, younger generation advisors might likely be focused on that. But what I found really quickly, accidentally really, was that I had a lot of shared values and understandings of people who had a different either stage in life or they weren't concerned with building up wealth necessarily, but they had something to work with and they were trying to reconcile their values with it.
Mhm.
So I ended up working with people who were really the driving force of why they were reaching out to an advisor was less for that planning around, basic life skills building in their 30s or even retirement, but more around like values first, right? And so some of those people are actually their ages about like vary, but that's what they have in common. And I would say they have like the clients that I specifically work with usually have a pretty sharpened critique of impact and systems, and so they come with very pointed questions. They're not sort of generalists about like I want to do good. They have like layers of complicated questions inside that.
Mhm.
And some of the people I work with are actually foundations
Mhm.
as well. So either foundations that are a family or foundations that are, different people who came together around a common cause, but who want to invest their endowment in alignment with their values. So
Mhm.
whether they're like an individual, a couple, a family, or an institution, that's the thread through all of them.
Kate, whenever you said there was people coming with nuanced questions, I'd love to hear an example or a story that you can share about what do those questions look like? How does that conversation go? What role do you try to play?
Great question. Let me try to think of a recent example. I mean, I get a lot of people who I would describe as sort of the next generation of this great wealth transfer, and they're typically women, right? So the wealth came from a different generation, or inheritance or marriage, and they are now stepping in the driver's seat of decision making. And while they have a lot of appreciation for what happened before them, they want to do it very differently. And so sometimes they come with questions honestly about capitalism, and whether they even want to build wealth from wealth, or how could they, is it even possible to have to be able to live somewhat off of the money they have, and live a comfortable life, however we've defined through our work together what enough is, and all of that good work, but can they do that and be values aligned with how they're investing? So that's like a common big picture question that people ask. I mean, I've had people question about the value of like owning real estate, and if that's sort of problematic in a colonial context that we live in the US. So oftentimes I don't have the answer, and we just talk about how we're inside imperfect systems, and the work is trying to push to make a difference and to do what you can, right? But they oftentimes are just appreciative to be able to ask the question and grapple with it, and have someone hold the space and not shut them down or say like, that's a ridiculous question, or like, just coming with no judgment, so they feel like they can walk through it. Those are, I had another people reach out to me actually today, and they want to, because of where the money's comes from, they really don't want to be at all. They want to be completely divested from the private prison industry. And but they also really care not just about the investments, but how is the firm they're going to work with trying to do its own work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because but their words were like, it's not good enough that you have ESG as an offering. We want to know how you're almost like metabolizing this work internally as an organization, which is a journey we're on. I think financial services has a long ways to go, but those are some of the questions that I get asked. And like I said, I think it's because of this generational change, and being able for people to feel comfortable to ask what they think might be a silly question, or am I even allowed to ask, like, to talk about society with my money person? Are we just supposed to talk about money, and that's somehow separate? So yeah, those are some examples.
I have a couple follow-ups from that. The first, with those really big questions, do you find that people are looking for your opinion on whether it's ethical for capitalism to be kind of the mechanism by which they express their values, or are you more allowing them to reflect their values, and where your opinion is coming in is more on the like actual on the ground nitty gritty planning side? How do you approach that? It's got to be a tightrope to walk, right?
It's a tightrope because there's so many layers to that, Gabe, right? So there's there's a lot of people in financial service who have a firm opinion about capitalism, that it is perfect and amazing and wonderful and shouldn't be questioned, right? So for folks who want that opinion, there are plenty of advisors to talk to, right? For folks who have a different opinion than that, or are willing to kind of look at, climate change and racial justice issues, and maybe there's something that's not getting addressed properly, and just letting markets do their thing without any questioning about what's being externalized. Then, it's not that our firm has, like, that firm of Abacus has an explicit stance around certain things. So it also depends on, I can't speak for my firm about my values. But more often than not, I don't give them my opinion because it doesn't matter what my opinion is at all. And no one client is going to have the same opinion about every single thing than any client, let alone any advisor. Like, so there's no point in trying to sort of push someone in one direction or another, or feel superior in any way. Like, I don't know. We all are coming with these different stories, and we've come through different experiences, and we're on a journey. So for me, oftentimes I will just allow them to ask questions, and I might ask questions to help them continue with their process. But I mean, I might affirm them and be like, yeah, so for example, sometimes clients think that they can get like, so somehow there's some magic pill or a magic process that will get them the most perfect, most sort of sacrosanct basket of companies that they can invest in public markets. And I try to dissuade them of that like anxiety that like they could, if they could just figure it out, they'd get there, and be like, we're going to take certain steps that for helping you curate, but you're going to be in imperfect things. And there's a journey through engagement, right? There's ways that you can, through your own giving and the work that you do in the world and how you use your voice, you can influence things too. This is just one place. But like relieve them of the pressure that there's some form of perfection that they should be attaining in their investment process.
Yeah, more different pathways of questions, but I'd love to follow up on that precisely real quick. So that's something that is, I think, really interesting. And we get that question all the time from advisors, because I think a lot of advisors and their clients have some sort of expectation that if we just turn on or check the box or turn on the switch for ESG, then we're going to get this perfect thing. And a lot of people are disappointed to find out that doesn't exist. And sometimes it doesn't pass the smell test if they're getting presented with information that everything is perfect, because that's not realistic. What are some of the approaches that you take to navigate those conversations and explain? Do you focus on trade-offs? Do you give examples or stories? Sometimes I find myself saying, until there's a perfect person, there won't be a perfect company. You won't be able to get a perfect portfolio. But I'd love to hear how you approach that question.
Yeah, so there's sort of like a portfolio design part answer to that. Then there's an answer of that this whole field is on a journey. Like, we're at a certain point on a journey of integrating, impact and externalities in understanding how companies are run. And what we see now is not what we would have seen 10 years ago. And we're going to see stuff, it's going to look very different in 10 years. So also like zooming out and understand where we're on this journey. I mean, we're not an active manager, so we take a particular approach to portfolio construction through our investment committee, right? And so we are always kind of matching a more sort of passive approach to investing on the financial side, but with the ability to do more active impact selection in terms of divestment, investment, and engagement, depending on the vehicle that they're using with their investments with us. Mm-hmm. So it will be that, we're going to be doing two things simultaneously with your investments. And I have this very sophisticated, really brilliant client who is himself on a journey. He's really passionate about learning a lot about impact investing. And he was very savvy about ways that you could, and he in this particular client is doing an SMA, so he's holding individual stocks, right? So we went through an exercise about his values and about what to screen and what he wanted to kind of tilt towards and reward in his portfolio in terms of impact practices, and what he wanted to engage on. So when the time came and he took a look at his portfolio and he was like, oh, why am I in X company? Because I thought they were bad. Like, I thought they had bad practices. Mm-hmm. And I took a step back because I'm like, I was surprised that he asked that question, because he had asked such really detailed, thoughtful questions about, oh, this stock I want to hold, I want to press them. This stock I definitely don't want to own, or this industry I definitely don't want to own. But then he kind of got to this place of, oh, isn't this company bad? Shouldn't it be screened out? And I was like, what does that even mean? right? So there's no one judge sitting on high being like, good company, bad company, good company, bad company.
Mhm.
You know this more than me. So yeah, portfolio construction as a way that we get at the conversation, and also recognizing that, you know, even in the financial planning firm that any advisor sits in, it's not perfect. There are things that are still being tweaked and being matured and developed. So, you know, when speaking as an advisor, like, I'm aware that, or anybody working in any business knows that in a snapshot in time, nothing is going to be absolutely perfect inside a firm, but there's value in continuing the journey and signaling, you know, what your values are.
Yeah. And another question around that, you said the CFP curriculum didn't teach you how to have these conversations or do this research. How did you learn to have that conversation, and how do you now approach that discovery process of discovering what a client's values are, which also could be imperfect, as you mentioned in that story, but what do you generally do to get the conversation started when someone reaches out and says they care about their values? What's your process?
Yeah, nothing in the CFP prepares you for that. Although the CFP, I think, does try to encourage you to listen to your clients, which at the end of the day is what it is. It's the secret sauce, right?
Mhm.
Ask questions, encourage. I mean, I will often ask. So there's a piece of the getting to know client and their values is around their relationship with money. And I think a piece of this, we kind of use this broad umbrella called values. But I think what we're talking about here, right, is what issue areas do they care about, right? What are they passionate about? What do they feel angst about? Where are they already putting their time? How do they want to look back towards the end of their life and say that they helped change something, or they at least put their shoulder to the wheel of some system that they identified as, you know, that is not sitting right with them. I have a lot of clients who are involved in membership associations with other people who have similar values and are thinking critically about their social values at this moment in history and their money. So oftentimes they're coming already having done that work in community with other people like them, which makes it really wonderful, because, you know, that is not something that you can figure out in one conversation with an advisor you barely know, but we can get somewhere if you haven't done that work also. So I usually, and there's no script for it, truly. To me, it's, you know, because the people that are coming to me, and I think to Abacus, are typically, you know, impact is, they're leading with that. I ask them what it means for them. I even have clients who say, I care about the environment, or I care about climate. And I say, what does that mean to, like, unpack that? Because that can look very different. You can have very different definitions of how someone thinks that we need to be addressing issues inside the context of climate change right now. So I don't assume. If they say something, I'll ask them or to tell me more about it. Sometimes their job is a flag, or where the money came from, or what they're doing with philanthropy. And sometimes just in describing to them what the options are for investments, they also can start leaning, oh, I'm really interested in, you know, that approach. So those are the ways that I would say we kind of walk clients through that. But big part of it is listening, asking questions, and actually asking them to explain what they mean if they use buzzwords. No one ever comes to me and says, I want to do ESG. Like, regular people don't talk like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They will say things like, I care about racial justice. I care about climate change and climate justice. I care about early childhood education. I care about affordable housing. Then we're able to kind of move from there. Maybe they'll give one thing that they care about.
That makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned the different ways that you can kind of build portfolios and the different portfolio solutions for different types of clients with different needs. I think you hit on it a little bit, but I think it would be helpful for the audience if you want to give a little bit of an overview of how you approach your portfolio construction process and what that looks like, and how you serve different types of clients with different portfolio solutions.
So at Abacus, the portfolio constructions happens inside our investment committee, which I'm not a member of, but I'm really passionate about taking what they've decided and trying to get advisors versed with how to tell the story and how to talk to clients. So that next step of like, now that we know what the offerings are, how do we communicate it to humans who know nothing or very little usually about investments? So, I mentioned the kind of investment philosophy that we have. And so what that looks like is we know that we want them to, we have this more passive approach, and we want them to be, to have a certain kind of financial construct. But then we're looking at, and I'm pausing here because they're slightly different things. So to talk about them all requires going into the differences. What there is in common is the kind of foundational soil of the financial framing, but we actually start not from the financials. We start with sort of scanning what managers are doing in public markets around impact, and we know what kind of asset classes we want covered, what sort of geographic areas, and then we know that we don't want to work with active managers for that. So we end up kind of coming down into what are the best options in the marketplace. And every few years, this gets sort of refreshed, right? So there's another due diligence round. And then we crafted 3 portfolios that are mutual funds or ETFs with kind of different flavors. So one is much more focused on carbon emissions and very focused on, I would say, the E and the G. We have one that is called ESG, and it's more blended, kind of a balanced approach to all these different areas from the financial side, from the engagement side, from the divestment side. And then we have one that's called social justice, and it is, really leaning hard into an intersectional approach on the equity side in particular for clients for whom they really care about that. It's something that our investment committee approved last year, and we're excited about that too. And that's attracts different people, oftentimes attracts people who might not have invested ever, or who are maybe stuck with not knowing they want to do something different, especially since 2020, like looking around at society and looking at the kind of chapter that we're in humanity's history on the planet, and they want to do something different. So all of these portfolios are the model portfolios that we offer. And then we have one option for, as I mentioned before, of separately managed accounts for folks who want to take that approach. And then they're able to do more tailored individual engagement through stock ownership. Whereas the other portfolios, they're a part of they're supporting the engagement that the managers are doing, right? So that can look differently depending on the managers under the hood.
I'd love to dive deeper into that. As you know, that's something that I'm extremely passionate about, is the shareholder engagement side of things. Before I started YourStake, I did a lot of academic research on the ways that impact can be created through sustainable investing, and shareholder engagement is huge. And I would love to hear kind of a 2-parter. The first is, when is the manager doing the engagement? How are you having those conversations? Because most people have never heard of shareholder engagement, and they throw their proxy ballots in the trash and they don't know what's going on. How do you introduce people to it? And then how do you go to the further step of, you said individuals are participating in shareholder engagement? That's really cool. I think a lot of people would love to hear how you identify a client that might be interested in that and what they can actually do.
So you packed a lot into that question. Let me see if I can take it step by step. So
I saw you taking notes though. So
no, I'm jotting it down. So the conversations with the managers are happening really from our investment committee. And, we have some colleagues at other firms who might be sharing information about due diligence. They've done conversations they're having, but we're not shy going to the managers and asking particular questions. We were a part of creating and signing something called Due Diligence 2.0, so a due diligence commitment to encourage asset managers to basically change how they've been doing due diligence of who they're going to, and what fund managers they're going to work with, that are continuing to really privilege the same people being in those seats, right? So it's 97% white males are fund managers, and what's going on, something clearly is going on to replicate that system. What could change? That still is, having a high standard of managers, but also addressing, there's a system break point where you have to already have had wins behind you and lots of experience in order to get new experience. So how do new people come in? So we used our voice as an investment manager to push asset managers and say, hey, did you sign this agreement? Like go to due diligence.com, I think what it is, and sign it, right? And we signed it, and other RIAs and other asset managers can sign it, foundations can sign it and say, like, we really care that you do this differently. So that's a form of engagement, right? It's a form of advocacy as a firm, but it also is articulating a standard that we want our managers to have, or at least tell us why they're not going to have it, and like tell us what their thinking is, or tell us what the journey they're on is. Because and I think it's really important, because I get a lot of questions, like I said, like pointed pushing questions from front end clients, and we got to push it all the way through the supply chain back to managers, right? So that they're hearing what people are requesting. So, sometimes I've had like a call with a client and an asset manager, especially a client I know is going to get real deep in on the questions, and I want the manager to hear it directly from the client, because, and obviously we don't always do that, it's very specific cases, but sometimes it's a form of engagement that we can facilitate more easily. But otherwise, we're asking these broader questions, how are you guys addressing these issues? And I'm not in that work, so I can't speak with like much detail about how they're having those conversations with the I don't know, 10 to 12 different managers inside the different portfolios, but they're happening, and they're happening consistently. Your second question was about clients. So I think the key to communicating engagement to clients first is helping advisors understand what it is so they can communicate it. Because if we go back to, in the example of Abacus, all of our advisors are certified financial planners, CFPs. Guess what is not covered inside CFP education? Shareholder engagement, right? Yeah. There might be a sentence on proxy voting, like at the most, but nobody knows what it is. And, it's very rare that someone at an RIA's job is just to focus on engagement, right? In more like active impact management, investment management firms, that they're doing that work. But in firms like Abacus, it's we just have a different setup. So I really feel passionate about helping advisors understand more what our managers are doing, so that they can get their own language, their own feel, and they can more authentically communicate with clients about what engagement is. So this year we've been on a journey in-house with advisors, bringing in managers and asking them the same set of questions. You're probably going to ask them what they are. I don't remember off the top of my head, but things like, we're going to ask you the same set of questions. You're going to come in, we're going to record it. So it's going to be, anyone can watch it if they miss it, in this era, so many Zoom calls. But then we want advisors to know that engagement isn't like a homogenous thing. Different managers are doing it differently. And so we are asking, like, what does engagement mean to you? What does it not mean to you? Right? How does the client interact with the engagement you do? How do you conceive of it? So these things that we can let the managers for themselves, and the advisors listen for themselves and communicate it, right? I'm hoping that we're going to see over time more and more advisors having these conversations with clients, feeling more solid themselves, that they understand what engagement is, and how our different managers do it differently, and how our different portfolios therefore do it differently. Some of the things I talk about with clients are, and I think some clients get really excited when they hear about engagement that is directed by communities on the front line of an issue, or that is informed by social movements or nonprofit work. And since I come from that space, it's very easy for me to talk that to those types of clients. And some clients get really passionate about being able to do direct engagement through their own stocks, if they're kind of able to be in the SMA portfolio. So that's another part of the client communication, is explaining how engagement could be something that you're doing, you have a little more of a direct hand in, or maybe something that folks who are more likely to be in the know about how issues are playing out are the ones that are leading the design, and you're backing that up and part of a more community, collective, collaborative approach to engagement. Some people, they're not really interested. So they might want to go with something that's just a little more traditional approach to engagement. And one of the things that we're doing this year is kind of creating I don't know how we haven't really thought about how to call it, but it's almost like the story of one engagement from start to finish, and how our different managers interacted with that one vote, that one proposal.
Yeah.
So we've identified one that one of our clients sponsored. They owned it, so they were the sponsor of the shareholder engagement action. And then when it came up for a vote, because it actually made it through that process, we're going to be doing the work to identify which of our portfolios, the other portfolios, held that company and how did they vote. And with no judgment around it, but just walk my peer advisors through that story so they can see through one micro example how engagement played out, where their clients in different portfolios may have intersected with this one story. Mm-hmm. And it got 30% vote. What does that mean? And my hope is that by literally shrinking this down to one micro story with all of these sort of prism, multifaceted ways to look at it, it gives advisors the ability to understand, to tell the story, and to communicate it to clients. Okay?
Yeah. Wow.
So that's like a really exciting thing that because this year I was like, I think we need to do this. I think we need to tell a story through one action.
That'll be so cool. I love that you're choosing an example that was sponsored by one of your clients. That'll be pretty amazing. And even though you're not going to have any judgment, I'm sure that client will have some judgment on which of the managers voted on their proposal. Wow.
Well, I don't. The clients may not ever see this story, right? This is internally for our advisors to understand what happened.
Sure.
The clients, what they care about is what they were able to influence. So yeah, that's an exciting way that we're coming at this from different angles to get people knowing what engagement looks like. And right now it's just a word that you can throw engagement, but if you really slow it down and unpack it, it starts to get really interesting.
Yeah. So I'm skipping around in my normal order, because you're saying that shareholder engagement, you think, has to be a growth area for your own firm, and also more and more people are going to try to do it. Do you think that is where ESG in general is headed, or what are your thoughts on the future of ESG investing?
Well, I feel like you and I have had this conversation before, and every time I think about it, I could go in multiple directions. I mean, I think for one, it's almost like when you go to the grocery store and things are labeled all natural. Like, what does that mean? It means nothing. Mm-hmm. There's no rigor, there's no boundaries, guidelines, standards to say something is all natural, right?
Soil.
Right? What is it?
It came from the ground, maybe.
Yeah, which, like, when you boil everything down, everything at some point came from Earth. So, like, it actually means nothing. So, I think the danger is that ESG just becomes all natural, right? It just becomes something in that one person. How do you distinguish if you feel like you got a particular approach to ESG that's you feel really good about as a firm, as an advisor, it's really rigorous. You've got, like, how do you distinguish that, right? So I think for the firms that are just jumping in, it's the all natural problem. And for the firms that have been doing this work and are thinking about it critically and are willing to keep it developing, not like resting on their laurels that, like, oh, we had ESG before everyone else did. But what does that mean? So I think that's one thing I think about. I think engagement is a huge differentiator. And I think that there's a lot of learning ahead for all of us about what that means. And, using something like the work that YourStake does is a part of that journey of honestly sort of shining sunlight on what's happening behind the scenes with different things, different investment vehicles that are using certain labels with nobody watching over that. And so, I mean, I'm not speaking to sort of SEC rules and things, who knows how that will all play out. Mm-hmm. But I think those are two things. What else? I think that clients are hungry for storytelling to understand, and that we need to be able to match the regular financial reporting with following through on the promise of ESG that was made on the front end of a relationship with a client. Like, you advisor told me that, me, the client, you told me that I was going to have this sort of impact with my values. Like, how's it going? And if it's really valued, then it has to hold steady with how we're communicating the entire investment.
Mhm.
I think that it's going to be very, very difficult, if not impossible, for firms, even if they are the all natural approach to ESG, to continue to sell something to people without telling a story about what it's doing. And my hope is that there is a way that people are able to disentangle and distinguish between different approaches to ESG, and in some respects, like let the market settle this, right? So as clients understand more of what this is and what this isn't, where are they going to be going? What questions are they asking advisors? Advisors can no longer just like know one sentence and can't go beyond that, right? The rigor is going to be is like this bar, the standard is going to have to be raised. A CFP education would require a deeper understanding of what engagement is, or a deeper understanding of what ESG is. And, a lot of the ways that clients are asking questions, they're in some respects ahead of advisors and I think that we have work to do in the seats that we're in to catch up and to help each other out, right? So some of what I anticipate is coming down the road.
Yeah, I might have to go rapid fire mode because I still have 100 questions and we're starting to get out of time, but I did see a stat. I think 95% of advisors said they received at least one SRI question in 2021, which was mind blowing to me. And to your point that clients are ahead of the advisors, we oftentimes have people reach out to YourStake because they have 3 or 4 clients that asked a question. All it takes is 3 or 4 out of 100, out of whatever it might be. It just takes a little bit for advisors to start thinking about it. And then when advisors hear this very vocally from the 3 or 4, and they bring it to the rest of their client base, the rest of the client base embraces it and they're very accepting of it. But it just takes a couple of the squeaky wheels to get the grease to get things going, type of thing. But I'd also love to ask, maybe rapid fire number 1 is around the storytelling, and you were talking about a consistent delivery of impact.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that is particularly important in this crazy market where you maybe can't have a consistent story around returns, but you can be more confident and still can tell that impact thesis? Or is that something that in these times people only care about the market and they're ignoring the impact side of things? I could see it going both ways.
Mm-hmm. It could go both ways, but I actually think we're doing a service to clients who came in saying that they care about impact with their investments by talking to them both sides, even in a down market.
Yeah.
Because you're reminding them like, oh yeah, I did say that I cared about this. And, it's really, really common that we compartmentalize in our brain this money conversation from all of our other values. And so the more we can, people, when they're coming, the first time to the door with their advisor, and they're like, I care, if they're coming impact first, which a lot of my clients are, they're like, I really care about this. I really care about this. And then if a year goes by and the market's tank and the only thing we're communicating on is the financials, it's like I'm missing reaffirming what they came caring about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it does a disservice, and it almost like it's like regressive, right? It's, if we're trying to evolve and close this gap between these spaces that aren't taking the holistic view into account, I think we have a responsibility to almost adhere to the commitment we made that we do care. And if you forget because you're freaking out about the down markets, I'm going to remind you of what else is happening here.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, 2 more. The next one is, you talked about the labels and people being confused by the labels. A lot of the way that we see advisors wanting to use tools like YourStake is that initial diagnostic. Is that something that you try to do as step 1? You said you try to figure out what someone's values are. Do you then go into the possible solutions, or do you start by saying, you hear your values, let's see how your portfolio is doing right now?
With the portfolio that they're coming with?
Yeah.
We haven't done that yet. I think we're in conversation about if that's something we want to do and how to handle the dynamics of that, right? Because we're human, and there could be stories wrapped up and feelings wrapped up in doing that. So it would have to be handled in the right way with nuance with each client. So I think generally right now we just look forward, like here's what you can be doing, and just orient them sort of in the front, the windshield of the car, right? And like less of the rear view mirror approach. Like this is like, we're talking about the future. We're talking about the legacy you want to have. We're talking about society. Like, let's look forward. What can you proactively do? I think it's a more empowering place, but I can see how showing someone what they're in and what they could be in could be an interesting contrast. It would take trying it out with a different personality type clients to see what they do with that information. And I think it would take an advisor who's really competent with navigating, right? So like, I don't know how some other firms set up their investment portfolio. And so if I'm showing this to you about their impact, I can't go very far with explaining to you the why. I can only show you, but I can explain to you much deeper what it would look like if you came here and what the contrast is. So I think there's always beauty in illuminating something for someone. But I find that clients often, they don't need to be persuaded to make the change. Like, show me what's good with my current portfolio and what could be better here on impact. I think they already know that they're looking for a change and they're ready to go. They don't need to look back.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I'm really excited to ask the last question, which is, you started off this video session talking about your journey to becoming a financial advisor. Would you say that your why has changed or evolved in the 5 years since you started working with Abacus?
Oh, Gabe, that's such a good question. Yes, my why has just gotten almost crisper. I came in with a fuzzy sense of like, I feel that I want to go towards the taboo of money. I feel like I want to understand how this works. I want to understand how how capital can be used to leverage change in the world. I don't really know what that means. Let me go get this designation and get in this field and figure it out. And I think really, honestly, it's through clients who are asking me the tough questions about impact and socially responsible investing and ESG. Those clients and different managers who are doing engagement differently, they're bringing an analysis that I just didn't see in the financial space that makes me feel more at home with this work. I really feel like my why is getting clear. I mean, I'm also a mom to 2 young children, and I in the past 5 years have learned a lot more about climate change and where we're at in this. And so I feel really passionate about working with clients who are really passionate about that work and intersectionality approaches to climate change. So I'm clear who I want to work with. And I'm clear that there are not a lot of needs for clients to find in the wide field of financial services. And so I think, as you get older and you get deeper into the work that you're meant to do in the world, you lean into your strengths and you just don't worry about the rest, because that's for others to handle. So my why has a lot to do with learning and also watching the evolution of the space of ESG and SRI and impact investing just in the short time I've been here. When I first got in 5 years ago, it shocked me because I never heard anyone talking about, actually 7 years ago, I never heard anyone talking about power. And when you're coming from the nonprofit, social justice, social change space, that is a conversation. So I thought it was odd that no one was really talking about that in these conversations about impact. And only in the past year or two have I been hearing more conversations like that coming into the financial services space. I find it really exciting because I think the more that we're breaking down these silos of work between the philanthropic 501c3, charity sector and SRI impact investing, ESG sector, like the more we're getting closer to finding solutions forward. So long answer to say, yes, my why has changed and it's only gotten sharper.
Wow. Kate, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciated this. We might have to do a part 2, but yeah, thank you again for joining the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. Thanks for this conversation. I think it's great that advisors get to hear more stories themselves and share.